Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff that has been happening all throughout the world, as you can certainly tell by the map. And as always, we'll be covering as much as we can from our sources. Right now, everything that we're doing is going towards, of course, and will always be going towards charity. So, as you may know, a lot of things that make the news, generally speaking, are not very great. It's relatively kind of depressing. You know, you're talking catastrophes, conflicts, wars, death, famine, you name it. It's something horrendous is usually what is making the news. Luckily, you guys allow us to be the news that gives back, and the way that we're able to do that is if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links. All of those have begun. A lot of those have been they have been submitted by you guys as the viewers, as different organizations you would like to see added to the channel, and all of them have been vetted by us. We've gone through one to make sure that the links are credible, that the people are credible, that what they're doing is credible. And on top of that, another big thing that we go for is that 80% or more of all the donations those organizations actually receive go directly to the programs, meaning they go directly to helping people, and only 20% or less, with an emphasis on the or less, goes to those salaries and administration's costs that make a lot of charity organizations so controversial. So please be sure to go down and check out in the video description and check out all of those organizations. They cover everything from helping the war effort, helping in Ukraine, helping the efforts for humanitarian aid in Ukraine, helping rebuilding, to helping all over the world, whether you're talking about Ethiopia, Somalia, Southeast Asia, and many, many others. There's all sorts of different projects that you can give back. And this is the reason why this channel will never be monetized for any kind of personal gain or profit. We'll never be doing any kind of super chats or anything. And should we actually get the ability to, at some point, we will be adding a charity fundraiser to every single live stream that we do here on the channel. So that is the goal, and we're hoping to raise a ton of money with that once we get to that point. But until then, we have everything down in the video description for you guys below, as well as also on the website. As we get ready to move into the news here, there's a ton of stuff that is happening throughout the world, and a lot of it has to deal with war and conflicts, terrorism, that kind of stuff. And a lot of people have a lot of questions. Not everyone served in the military, not everyone has a background or on this stuff, but a lot of people do have an interest. So if you are joining with us live, I am watching the live chat tonight, as I am every single night that we go live. And if you would like, please feel free to ask questions and make comments. I will be reading through them throughout the stream, and as I see comments and questions, I will address them, and I will try to answer your questions to the best of my ability. If you're new here, a little bit of background on myself. I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I was an 0352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps, and I was a corporal. I served with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. I did 2 tours to the Middle East while I was in active service. My first tour between October of 2017 and March of 2018, I served in the country of Syria for roughly 4.5 months, as well as about a month and a half in Kuwait during transit. There I supported special operations and Kurdish partners and coalition partners as well during Operation Inherent Resolve, and the fight against the Islamic State, as well as stabilization efforts there in the country of Syria. My second tour to the Middle East I did between October of 2019 and March of 2020. There I was the Javelin team leader for the Javelin team attached to the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time. On New Year's of 2020, I responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex, which is currently being overrun at the time by about 4,000 protesters, and I was there and oversaw all anti-armor operations over the Baghdad Embassy complex during my time. After that, I was rotated to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines as they were preparing to deploy to fight the Houthi rebels in Yemen. I am a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I am a fully cross-trained rifleman. I am a partially cross-trained radio operator. I am also a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional medical training on top of also being a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. Now, outside of just these things, I try to remain well-rounded, though I claim to be an expert in none of that. And so I do have interest in history, human geography, geopolitics, archaeology, paleontology, and a wide spectrum of other things that I have interest in. But once again, I claim to be no expert. Regardless if I am an expert in something or not, if you have a question or if you want to know more, I implore you, as a viewer, to please do your own research. There is no substitute for doing your own research. That is what is that is the most important thing. And if you want a starting place, we have provided our maps. So our maps are archived, clear to the point that we began doing the streams and archiving them on our website. The link is also in the description. You can interact with this map and follow along throughout any of the streams. I post them before every stream goes live. And you can also go back through and conduct your own research and read additional articles should you wish. With that, we immediately go into the news here, starting off with, of course, the special report of the night, which is here in the country of Ukraine. And there is a ton of developments in the war as we're coming in here. The first one is a little bit interesting, We've seen quite a few weapons popping up throughout the duration of this war, and some of them kind of have turned our heads a little bit. This one is no exception. This is an oldie but a goodie. These are dual-mounted PM 1910-30 Maxim machine guns. They were filmed being used by territorial defense forces, and this is somewhere in the northeastern part of Ukraine, kind of in the back lines. And they're not seeing front line action, of course. These are fixed with an anti-aircraft sight. It's a reticle you've seen probably in every game and movie known to man set in World War I and World War II. And these are likely meant to be used in an attempt for not just training individuals how to use machine guns, as the basic principles remain the same, but also to be used against Shahed drones, which are loitering munitions, the kamikaze drones, which we'll get to as there's more information on those coming out today as well. We can actually take a look at this here. See this guy, of course, puffing a cigarette in his mouth, and that is the Maxim. Specifically, we know that these are PM or M1910/30s. So the PM 1910/30 was actually, the design was bought by at the time, the Imperial Russians before the outset of World War I in 1914, and they continued to manufacture the PM 1910 clear up until 1945. It saw extensive usage in the Soviet Army and during World War I and World War II. The reason we know it's a PM 1910/30 is because in the 1930s there was an upgrade done to a lot of these, and this is likely a World War II version of the Maxim, because this is a water-cooled machine gun. Normally there's a tube, and you can see where the chains are dangling underneath. There's a tube that feeds into this to water-cooled machine guns. How it keeps cold. Most machine guns you see nowadays are air-cooled. However, the Soviets did a very specific modification to this, and you can see that right here. The reason why we suspect that this one's probably from World War II, manufactured sometime during the 40s, is the fact that the Soviets took the cap off of the exhaust system of a tractor, and they put them over the top of the water-cooled jacket, which is this big round thing that you see around it. What this allows for troops to do is it allows for Soviets to take snow and actually put it into the cooling jacket, even if you don't have the hookup for the water, to keep water flowing through the cooling jacket and to keep the barrel cold. So we know that this is at least in the 1830s a design to this, but this is likely probably made during World War II. Once again, these things are not seeing frontline service. It is designed specifically in the 1800s. The Maxim gun is from 1884, but it was the first modern machine gun ever put into mass production and was heavily utilized during World War I. This is the machine gun that turned World War I into trench warfare. This is the end of the cavalry charge. This is the thing that turned World War I so deadly, because every side available was able to jump onto getting the Maxim machine gun. It was sold to almost every combatant in the world during the world, right before and during the World Wars. The Maxim company was later bought out by the Vickers company, known for the Vickers tanks, and also later the Vickers Maxim machine gun, later than just the Vickers, which was heavily utilized by British troops during the colonial era and during World War II, and then also follow-on conflicts following that. So that is what we see usually. This one is going to be chambered in 7.62 by 5.4 millimeter R. So that is the same standard type of Soviet ammunition used by also the Mosin-Nagant and many other cartridges. So, a little bit of interesting history there, but also something that you really wouldn't see. This is a World War I machine gun, essentially. World War I, World War II machine gun that we're seeing in service in the 21st century. It's an oldie but a goodie, but it is outdated, and at least it's seeing backline service, but it's still concerning, and that's not the only thing that we've seen similar to this. Russian forces in rear echelon areas, at the very least, and those of the LNR and DNR, or the militias that were formed within the separatist regions, we're seen carrying the Mosin-Nagant, developed in the late 1880s in order to be carried as the standard service rifle of the Soviet Union throughout the Russo-Japanese War, or the Sino-Russo War, and also the carried throughout World War I and World War II, most famously. As we come through here, we enter into Kyiv, and Kyiv, unfortunately, today was started at a very abysmal tone, as I'm sure you are aware. And what we see here is the fact that Shahed drones, the same things that these Maxim machine guns are likely going to be targeting, once again were launched at the capital of Kyiv. In total, 35 drones were launched by Russian forces. The Shahed 136 and its smaller cousin, the 131, are developed by Iran. They're only produced by Iranian companies, uranium arm manufacturers, and were sold and provided, as well as the training provided to the Russians by Iranian forces. These have been used extensively. They only cost about 20,000 British pounds, euros, the equivalent of euros, about 20,000 euros, making them relatively cheap compared to most ballistic munitions. They're a loitering munition. They can stay in the air for hours. They're most noticeable by they have been so far called moped drones because of the distinctive sound, so similar to that of a moped, used in their very, very basic engine. But these things are suicide drones, carrying cases up to 40 kilograms. And we can see these, once again, bore down on Kyiv. 30 of the 35 drones launched were shot down. However, of course, the whole purpose of launching this many drones, and as we've seen throughout the entirety of the country, that many missiles, with upwards of 70 missiles at a time, the point is to overwhelm air defenses. Survivability of these missiles is going to be minimal, and that's very well understood by the military planners of the Russians. The Russians are expecting most of these to be shot down. The point is that some make it through. The air defenses can't shoot them all down if you launch them all at once. And we can see that's exactly what happened. The primary target of these drones was to target civilian critical infrastructure, meaning their energy infrastructure. This is under Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, which was adopted in 1977. The fact that the energy infrastructure within this region is specifically the main purpose of it is to provide energy and services to civilian populations makes targeting of such infrastructure a war crime under the Geneva Conventions, and therefore punishable both in the International Criminal Court of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, which both have investigations open into the ongoing war. And we can see coming from Alexei Kuleba, who is the head of the Kyiv Regional Military Administration, quote, due to the morning Russian missile attack, Obukhevsky, Vysorodosky, and Buchnatsky districts in the Kyiv region are partially de-energized. Only critical infrastructure is connected to an electricity supply at the moment, end quote. And I do apologize if I butcher the pronunciation of these things. I barely speak English, folks, but so I at least will make good attempts at trying to make pronunciations. We can see some of this coming out this morning. This is a very early morning before the crack of dawn. This is one of the Ukrainian. This is a Ukrainian citizen here just in Kyiv who ended up recording what was happening. course, those horrifying, those very ominous sirens that blare out during airstrikes. Coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine's official Twitter, they said today, kids wake up to anticipation from gifts from St. Nicholas, as today is the St. Nicholas Day there in Ukraine. And it's a precursor to Christmas. Today they woke up to air raid sirens, drone explosions, and shelling. Russia has launched one more attack on our country. # Russia is a terrorist state. Once again, coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. And we can see firefighters putting out, once again, electrical infrastructure targeted by the Shaheeds. From Amin Dzepper, who is a member of the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, specifically the first deputy minister of foreign affairs of Ukraine, but also a member of the Verkhovna Rada, or the Ukrainian parliament. We can see here some of the photos that she has taken, including today's thumbnail, which is included here. Once again, another post made by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, citing just how many drones were shot down. These are, once again, Shahed 136/131 drones shot down very early this morning. And once again, the Verkhovna Rada themselves pointing out some of the damage, because not all of these ended up impacting their primary target, but their secondary target is mostly to cause panic amongst the civilian populations and civilian casualties. It is a war of attrition, and the Russians are pulling no punches, and specifically going out of their way to cause immense amounts of destruction in and amongst civilian populations, seeing it as useful for the war effort, despite it being horrendous war crimes. We can see here, this is one of these outlying villages listed by Kaleba earlier, which shows, some of these ended up landing in residential areas, obviously not military targets. A couple questions already coming in tonight, a lot of them actually. From Barbara Christina, good to see you again. I'm happy that you're able to catch me live. I know it is very late where you're at over there in the UK. It says, one question: did you hear about Putin changing the laws about war crimes in Russian military? No longer a war crime. So that is not how changing war crimes works. So in order for something no longer to be considered a war crime, it would mean that the party no longer, or it would mean that basically international law doesn't exist anymore. The Geneva Conventions are just gone. The fact of the matter is that Russia really hasn't paid attention to the Geneva Conventions since the beginning of the war. Very early on, the first couple of days of the war, we saw them having some types of rules of engagement and withholding to an extent, and things that would fly day one of the war, where the Russians were the very first day of them invading, and some of the the babushka walking up to this occupying Russian soldiers saying, "Fill your pockets with sunflower seeds, so that way when you lie down in this country, they'll grow from you." That wouldn't fly about a week later. That would be an immediate on-the-spot execution, summary or extrajudicial execution right there on the spot, more than likely. And that's what we've seen really happen throughout the war. You also see indiscriminate shelling, and you see use of incendiary weaponry. So even though the Russian Federation is a party to the Geneva Conventions, the vast majority of international conventions too, with the exception of about the Ottawa Agreement, or Ottawa Convention, they really don't care. They really haven't paid attention to it. They're committing war crimes regardless. And they're doing it on a systematic scale, considering just the size and scope of how many times it's been conducted. Under the 1993 Rome Statute, there comes a point where it's no longer considered just war crimes, it's considered crimes against humanity, and it's been perpetrated. And you see that with how the military tactics being used by the Russians really continue to perpetrate war crimes, just in and of themselves, and the tactics themselves are just war crimes in a formal doctrine. Now, as for whether or not they have changed the law about that, we do have the database, in which case we look at things. However, it can be really difficult to go through and translate all of that. However, something that we have noticed when we're going through the State Duma's database of all of their drafted documents and everything that's been submitted for review within their different parties within the Russian State Duma, we've noticed that things such as changes about crimes of war crime, or the laws regarding war crimes, and decriminalization of acts of horrific deeds, rape, torture, execution, and that kind of stuff that being perpetrated on the front lines of Ukraine, that stuff is actually can be relatively difficult to go to. A lot of times it's blatantly just omitted. It's not something that the Russians actually talk about on any official channels, and in order to access them, there has to be a slip up by the Russians, which we've seen before, and luckily very smart, capable individuals, including our own team here, have been able to archive some of that, including when they were stealing grain from Kherson and Donetsk and Zaporizhia oblasts. But we've also seen where once that slip up has happened, to make sure that by legal standards it's accessible to their constituents, it's accessible to the Russians themselves. There is actually passcodes and things that they have put in place that only Russian citizens would have, so you can access it. So we cannot verify that that is the case. However, we have also heard that that is a thing, and it wouldn't be the first time that that has popped up, and something that we could, with very good confidence, not necessarily verify, but give some very good credence to, saying, yes, this is something we're very sure has happened, but we cannot confirm independently. I'm sorry if that doesn't answer your question, but that is the best answer I can give for that. Looking forward, he says, suspects of those from World War II, they will shoot down a drone still. A lot of early 30 and 50 cal machine guns use the same system. That is because every machine gun, essentially in the modern era, talking about the Maxim, every machine gun of the modern era is essentially based off of the Maxim design, to include John Browning's design later when he designs the M1919, which comes out immediately after World War I. And allows for them to go on and create the Browning 50 cal, which now continues into service even today. But yes, water-cooled 30 cals were a thing, chambered in 30-06. Once Russia runs out of these, what are they going back to? Napoleonic bayonets, when he talks about the drones. That's a really good question, and that is a question that we simply don't know. The Russian arsenal, there have been a lot of varying estimates as to how much the Russians have left in their arsenal. The question really is, how much do they truly have left, and what out of what they have left, what is actually usable? As we've seen before, the Russians aren't exactly what we would consider to be capable of maintaining. Corruption's really dug into the pockets of the Russian Federation's military, and they're not very good at maintaining their equipment, to the point that there's a joke going around that the Russian nuclear threat probably isn't there because the missiles would blow up in their silos. But still, nuclear threats are something to take seriously, but that really brings into light just how bad the Russians are at maintaining their equipment. We've seen it with the conscripts that they have been, the equipment they've been provided, or even in the lack thereof. In fact, over 1.5 million winter coats designated for the Russian military have vanished overnight and were presumed to have been eaten by mice and moths. We certainly know that that has not happened, but that is what is being formally stated by the Russians has occurred. So very deplorable maintenance, but we can suspect that they will find other outliers. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians, Iran has proved very effective at providing basic level modern military equipment, such as the Shahed 131s and 136s, and maintain a production capability to continue pumping those out, making them relatively cheap and easy to use for the Russians, and more effective than most of their ballistic missiles anyway. The most concerning are their helmets. William Young says the most concerning are their helmets, which are literally labeled, "This is a toy, it provides no protection." That is correct. Shahed in our chat, Reaper's in our chat. Has there been any concrete info on Ukraine getting Reaper drones? That is a no. We have not gotten anything outside of the initial statements that it was on the table. But we've heard that a lot before. Hell, even M1A, 1A2 Abrams are on the table for Ukraine. It doesn't mean that anything solid has come out of it, and we really don't want to talk about hypotheticals too much here. Have I ever been in a Turkish prison? No, I have not been in a Turkish prison. All right, there we go. So, on a little bit of lighter news, following the airstrikes that were carried out today against Ukraine, what we end up seeing is that, in a little bit of lighter news, today is the first day of Hanukkah. And if you are celebrating, I do wish you a happy Hanukkah. So Hanukkah is a Jewish holiday for those that don't know. And today, the first candle was lit of Hanukkah, and that includes very publicly in the city of Kyiv. It marks the beginning of the holiday for the Jewish community. Each of the 8 days is celebrated with games, feasting, singing, and spending time with friends and family. And each day, the next candle on the menorah, or the large candle holder, is lit until all 8 candles are finally lit on the final 8th day of Hanukkah. Hanukkah falls on I believe it's the 28th day or one of the 28th day of the last month of the Jewish calendar. That allows for, and that can actually fall in several different areas, or on the Hebrew calendar. I apologize. So if you are celebrating today, once again, have a very happy Hanukkah, and I hope that you are able to spend plenty of good time with friends and family. You can see there, that is the giant menorah there in downtown Kyiv. And also posted by Anton Jaroshenko. So pretty awesome to see. And this is a video that was pretty striking. That it came out this morning amidst the airstrikes. And we've seen very happy moments and we've seen very sad moments when it comes to this war. And this one brings a lot of mixed emotions. So I thought it was worth sharing here on the channel because it really illustrates, you know, what the war in Ukraine has really turned into, or what life is like here in Kyiv, away from the front lines considering the war. And just take a look. Well, yes, that is a wounded Ukrainian soldier who has just returned from the front lines, and he is meeting his child in Kyiv while the air raid sirens are blaring this morning during a heavy snowfall. That is not a wild ride of emotions. I honestly do not know what is, because that really symbolizes quite a bit of what's happened in the war. I mean, Ukrainian troops, there's high casualties on both sides. They're defending their families. They're coming home to these families, wounded and broken and all sorts of stuff, traumatized, and you know, there's the whole country is a war zone. I mean, there is no safe place in Ukraine. There is no safe place. There are some parts that are definitely safer than others, but there is no safe place. And that is just the reality of what this war is. I mean, what this war has done to the entire country of Ukraine. We do have a war crimes update that is coming from the press service of the National Police of Ukraine. And so far, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 49,592 war crimes against Ukraine and its citizens. At that point, there comes a point in which a war no longer is just a tragedy, but has turned into a crime against humanity. We come over here and we begin off our day here in the Donbass. The Donbass is these regions of Ukraine where the heavy fighting is taking place. And we start in the Donetsk Oblast over here, where we get, of course, our updates from the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, Pavel Korolenko. And he says, quote, on December 18th, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 3 killed, 4 injured. And we do get this from his official Twitter here, which he also gives us an update. This covers the past 24 hours of activity. And this came out as of 8 a.m. local time there in the Donetsk region. And so far, citizens killed, not including those in occupied territories of the Donetsk Oblast, such as Mariupol, Volnovakha, or Donetsk itself, have come up to, since February the 24th, 1,268 civilians killed, 2,757 so far have been wounded. Blue Hammer says, did you hear the Polish Ministry of Defense say they're mobilizing for a March invasion of Lvov? I believe it's Lviv. And no, I have not seen that from any Polish sources. Coming from Soledar, which is here on the northern flank of Bakhmut. So far up here, it starts from about Belhorivka, and we can actually measure this out from Belhorivka, and it ends right about Zaitsev. And it's about 23 miles across. This is the main section of front line. This 23 miles is the bloodiest place in the entire war. This 23 mile stretch is the bloodiest sector of the front lines of the war. This is the area in which the bloodshed is astronomical. And we take a look here to the northern flank of Bakhmut, which is still in Ukrainian hands, in the contested city of Soledar. Soledar has been contested for some time, and Russian forces hold the rural eastern parts of the city, while Ukrainian forces hold the much more urbanized western parts of the city of Lviv, or of Soledar here. And we see that the shelling has continued. The city is essentially destroyed, and every single one of these cities along this front line is essentially destroyed, and we can see that here. But we can still see that plenty of fighting is ongoing. Artillery bombardments have left the entire city in nothing but rubble, and we can say the same about many of the others. Bakhmut still remains firmly in Ukrainian hands, however, attacks continue. The reality is that this front line resembles much more World War I style warfare. It's very reminiscent in that horror, and thus it has been subjected to innumerable amounts of incendiary bombardment. We've seen incendiary bombardment using 9S-22M missile or rocket systems fired by the BM-21 Grad or Hail system. The fact of the matter is that the terrain around here the cities are destroyed. Every single building is damaged or destroyed, much like the city of Mariupol. Bakhmut has been shelled multiple times today, long-standing indiscriminate rocket bombardments by the BM-21 Grads and D-30 systems over the entire city for months on end now. Civilians are still living here, living in their basements. It's too dangerous to come outside whatsoever, and it's too dangerous for any humanitarian aid groups to actually move into this area, as we have seen Ukrainian forces providing whatever aid they can straight from their packs as they're walking their way up to the front line trenches. And it is trench warfare, but the Ukrainian forces and Russian forces have dug in to standard trench defensive lines. According to Ukrainian sources, 20,000 Ukrainian forces within this 23-mile stretch of front line are embattled against 30,000 Russian troops. And so far, the casualties have been extremely high. Wave attacks sent from the Russian lines to attempt to punch through Ukrainian trenches have been met by machine gun fire, running directly into 50 cals and PKM machine gun nests and being cut down in the dozens. And we've seen plenty of videos of the gruesome aftermaths of that. The main force is mostly the private military corporation known as the Wagner Group. It was founded in 2014 by a man named Yevgeny Prigozhin. Specifically, this is the group that was designated to take Crimea during the invasion and also to support separatist forces within the Donbass after the 2014 Maidan Revolution. They are the ones that are also responsible for attacking U.S. forces in 2018 inside of Syria, as well as attempting to perpetrate war crimes in the country of Mali following the French withdrawal and attempting to place the blame on the French, who caught them via drone footage at a recently abandoned French encampment. This organization, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is known as Putin's chef. He is known for having started with a catering business, providing banquets to both Putin as well as high-level State Duma officials and high-level officials within the Russian military. You can see some of the fighting ongoing here around Bakhmut and just the general scenery of what Bakhmut has turned into.
Давай. Смотри. Ебануться.
Давайте, пацаны! Это Бахмут, ребята!
Це піздець, артилерія нас так отпиздячила. Це наші карифанчики. Підарові їбаші, блядь. А це нас так отпиздячили, блядь. А це наша ответочка пішла. Пу-пу. Дома, блядь. Так, ну в цьому окопі я живу, короче. Да. Це наш пулеметчик. Сьогодні я ночі ним пиздячив підарасов, сука.
Вон по пидорам наш танчик работает. О! Красава нахуй. Вообще отлично. Еще один выход. Бля, я его вон занял. Сейчас, раз, два. О! Арнюня.
Coming from the British Ministry of Defense on their daily intelligence update, they say that Russian military proxy group Wagner continues to take a major role in attrition combat around the Donetsk Oblast town of Bakhmut. In recent months, it has developed offensive tactics to make use of a large number of poorly trained convicts it has recruited. We have seen and aired videos of recruiting convicts from local prisons, guaranteeing after 6 months of service, should you survive, to be free. Individual fighters are likely issued a smartphone or tablet, which shows the individual's designated axis of advance and assault objective superimposed on commercial satellite imagery. At platoon level, and above, commanders likely remain in cover or give orders over radios informed by video feeds from small uncrewed aerial vehicles or UAVs. These are the little quadcopter drones that we've seen heavily utilized. Individuals and sections are ordered to proceed on the pre-planned route, often with fire support, but less often alongside armored vehicles. Wagner operatives who deviate from their designated assault routes without authorization are likely being threatened with summary execution. And we have seen where the Wagner group executing individuals before, especially during the course of the conflict. These brutal tactics aim to conserve Wagner's rare assets of experienced commanders and armored vehicles at the expense of more readily available convict recruits, which the organization assesses as expendable. And that is essentially the mentality of the entire Russian military so far, and how we see them operating in and around this area. Once again, those wave-style attacks that are running headlong into Ukrainian frontline trenches that are annihilating them with interlocking fields of fire. We come down here just near the city of Bizki. Bizki was captured by Russian forces some time ago after it was completely leveled with TOS-1A thermobaric munition launchers. And we see where Ukrainian forces are continually putting pressure within this region on the city of Donetsk, which still lies under occupation. However, today we see, even in this brutal war, we see acts of heroism, and we do understand that wars go both ways. That is the reality of it. Both Ukraine and Russia suffer heavy casualties. Aircraft are no example, but this is certainly a rare video to see. This is a flight of Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopters providing close air support to ground troops within the region near Pervomysk. And we see here where one is successfully shot down by Russian forces. However, their wingman, without hesitation, immediately begins to slow his helicopter down and bring it in to attempt to rescue any surviving crew members from the helicopter well within the hot landing zone there, considering his friend was just shot down. We can take a look at this from both the Russian and the Ukrainian point of view. Take a look. This first one up is from the Russian point of view, coming from war reporter Wargonzo. Take a look. So you can see here a flight of Mi-8 helicopters. You can see that first one having been hit. You can see the flames coming out from it. And you can see the second pilot coming in. He was already slowing down at that point, and he comes in to bring it in nice and close to hover nearby for a landing. He's going to circle around and position the helicopter to where they can actually pick up any survivors of the crash. Once again, this is from the Russian point of view. This is happening near Pervomysk. This is just to the northwest of Bizki. So once again, that is the Russian point of view. And here is from the Ukrainian helicopter's point of view. That second one this is the second one that actually goes in to attempt a recovery of the downed air crew. Take a look. so there it is, the rescue of whatever aircrew survived that downing. It looks like they tried to do a controlled landing there, or a hard landing of the aircraft, and hopefully there were survivors. But that is both points of view from that, but the first one from the Russians and the second from the Ukrainian pilots themselves. And trench life, it's been a horrible experience since 1914, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. We have a couple of small videos coming in here from TikTok, mostly. And the first one this is from the Ukrainian soldier in the video. He says, "Minecraft made this look easy," and I can't agree with him more.
В Майнкрафте выглядело проще. Один раз кликнул, квадратик пропал. В реальной жизни так не работает, да, Слава?
The second one, they say, quote, "I got 2 candles here. Look at my feet. Pretty sure the pants are attached to me at this point. It's a little rough, but we're fighting for everyone."
Вот так я и сплю. Одна сеточка, вторая сеточка. Мои ботинки вместе с штанами, которые, наверное, уже приросли ко мне. Трошки тяжко, але ми з усім упораємося. Слава Україні!
Finally, to give you an idea, so offensive operations have relatively slowed. The kinetic activity of the front line, with the exception of about that 23-mile area, has really slowed substantially. And the reason for this, in part, is the Rasputitsa. Rasputitsa is Russian. It stands for Sea of Mud. It's a literal translation. And the Rasputitsa is something that sets in Eastern Europe that makes it makes fields impossible to pass over. And it's difficult to pass them on foot, let alone in a 70-ton armored vehicle with very thin treads. That is what we're seeing here. That's what we're kind of seeing all across the front line, is difficulty for both sides to maneuver on the Rasputitsa. This means that their maneuver elements, their maneuver troops, these battalions of armored vehicles that are trying to find and poke and prod and find gaps in the line, they're restricted to paved roads, essentially, as dirt roads are going to turn into a mud and fields are impassable almost entirely. We can see that they're forced to use paved roads. Very easy to plot, very easy to target with artillery, and obviously it makes trying to outmaneuver your enemy extremely difficult, as they can kind of guess where you're going to have to come from. And to give you an idea, take a look at the conditions. This is the Rasputitsa mud. We've shown it here before. This is a Humvee stuck in it. It's this very, very thick, impossible to describe mud. It's extremely difficult. There's almost no way around it. And these heavily armored vehicles, especially the Humvee, which is flat bottom, but that upgraded armor packages that are Class A and B armor packages that were put on, weighs this vehicle down, and it makes it very easy to bottom out. MRAPs don't fare much better. You can take a look here as well. This is some of the armored vehicles trying to make it through here. And keep in mind, these are the dirt roads. These are the dirt roads that, these are actual roads that they're supposed to be using. This is why they have to stick with paved roads. You can see the difficulty their vehicles are even using. And these are roads. These are actual unimproved roads that they're using meant for this town. So someone talking about Mariupol earlier, and something, but it brings tears to the eyes, and we have to agree. And we can see what's happening in Mariupol coming from some of the local Telegram channels from Mariupol, as well as some other input here too. The fact of the matter is that demolitions continue in Mariupol. Mariupol continues to be demolished, or at least the Russians continue to demolish whatever's left of the ruins of the city, which is 90% destroyed at this point. Oftentimes, these buildings have yet to be combed through, and therefore the decomposed bodies are rarely removed and buried in the already huge mass grave sites that are spread all over the area around the city. As such, it's expected that demolition work continues in both an effort to clean up the destroyed city, but also in an effort to cover up the war crimes committed by the Russians should this territory ever be recaptured and the incident be investigated by individuals on the ground. And part of the reason we can pretty much essentially understand that this is the case is the Mariupol Drama Theater. The Mariupol Drama Theater was bombed by a Russian aircraft which dropped two 500-pound or 500-kilogram bombs onto the Mariupol Drama Theater, which survived the Second World War, by the way. This happened during a temporary ceasefire in order to allow for individuals civilians to evacuate out of the city, which is currently under siege. These corridors, humanitarian evacuation corridors, also happened to be shelled simultaneously as this happened by Russian forces using the BM-21 Grad, killing innumerable amounts of civilians. The thing about the drama theater is roughly 300 people are expected to have been killed in the strike as it was being used as a bomb shelter. The word children was painted on both sides of the walkway very clearly and in Russian in order to designate it as a enemy or as a bomb shelter for civilians when this attack occurred. And we can see that they are destroying these abandoned buildings, of course, but also they have covered up the Mariupol Drama Theater with very high walls and have begun to demolish it as well. These are some of the photos coming from parts of Mariupol right now, and you can see some of the demolitions work that's ongoing here. This is the exact same street. This is Shevchenko Street. Sorry, this is Kalitskaya 88. This is Shevchenko Street. You see the demolitions work ongoing here. This is some drone footage of the work that's already been done demolitions wise. And we can take a look here. So as you can see, those high walls that were put up with the facade of the drama theater, by the way, and the actual drama theater inside. You can see the impact crater. That is where the Fab 500 actually went through the center of the center and rear of the Mariupol Drama Theater. Both of them detonated, punching all the way to the basement and setting a large fire in the frontal part of that has left it charred and destroyed. And here is from the inside of that wall as they're taking the drama theater down today. Thank you to the user who was able to find this on our Discord channel. That we were looking for this for some time and we're unable to find it, so thank you very much. We get a lot of stuff from our Discord. I really appreciate the community that really pitches in on this project. It's been an amazing thing, and we couldn't do it without you guys. Delta Aviation 23 asks, will the whole city of Mariupol have to be demolished? 90% is the estimate. So 90% of the city of Mariupol, if it wasn't completely obliterated during the actual besiegement of the city, whatever is left standing, 90% of it will have to be demolished and rebuilt in its entirety. However, there have been no independent investigative teams allowed to Mariupol to conduct any kind of investigation into the possible perpetration of war crimes. I say possible. I mean, it was pretty evident. They made propaganda videos of them doing it. And they also broadcasted it on international TV. So, I don't... Anyway, we continue on that. But the fact of the matter is that it was destroyed, and they are essentially destroying evidence at this point. Under the guise of cleaning up the city of Mariupol now that they have liberated it. It's occupied, by the way. Coming from the Azovstal was apparently going to be used once again. The Russians announced that they will begin production of from the Azovstal once again as the company Eurovagonzavod plans to acquire the parent company of the plan, Azovmash. While the facility is heavily damaged, they will use whatever equipment is left and is still functioning and install new furnaces to bring steel production back online. Once again, coming from the Telegram channel, Mariupol Now. Jump up into the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, where we come over to the city of Nikopol. Once again, shelled by Russian forces, of course, using the BM-21 Grad system, right across the river, right across the Dnipro River from them. Once again, most of these artillery strikes landing in residential areas, which is the majority of the city. And one person during the strikes, as of yesterday, was wounded. Luckily, only just one person was wounded and was taken to the hospital. We can see the damage coming from the strikes on this residential infrastructure. Once again, a war crime to do this, using indiscriminate strikes and indiscriminate weapon system, is actually against Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, once again adopted in 1977, using indiscriminate style weapon systems in order to strike at targets within civilian infrastructure or highly concentrated civilian areas that does not move to minimize civilian casualties, or an attempt to minimize civilian casualties does constitute a war crime, and to do it frequently and to do it systematically does constitute crimes against humanity, as well as the deliberate targeting of civilians if that is the case as well. Whether you're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, depending on what you're using in the plan of attack, it can still be constituted as a war crime. You can see the destruction of residential areas, of course, constituting a war crime in and of themselves. The city of Kherson itself was struck as well. The Kherson was once again struck, specifically the administration's building. Russian artillery decided to strike at the city center. The administration's building was struck. It took a direct hit from a Russian missile not but a week ago. Once again, this strike also hit the building again, collapsing sections of it. The casualties at this moment are not known. We do not have any clear numbers of casualties coming from any of our sources regarding this. This is from the strike earlier today.
Там вон пожарка проїхала, зараз стоїть. Вон її бачите. Така ось херня зараз. Ну, прильотів не було, нічого такого. Просто от, блядь, ні з того, ні з сього воно запалало.
Once again, coming from Amin to Zepper, we can see the damage to the building, and its entire wall sections collapsed. The destruction to that administration's building happening once again. We get to pop down here into the southern part of the Oblast, where we actually, right here, right before you get to Crimea, this is still technically the Kherson Oblast. But this is Chanor here, right before you get into Crimea, and this is from a Russian tourist point of view. It says, this is it, guys. Fuck this. I'm never going to Simferopol again. We passed customs, and a few moments later, we heard screams, and then a loud explosion. More explosions followed in the field. Never going here again. This is coming from the cameraman.
Вон что. Короче, все нахуй. С этой хуйней, с этим Симферополем я завязал, как хотите. Я больше сюда не поеду. Все, вот. Короче, стояли, легли спать, границу прошли, легли спать. Вот. Крики, нахуй, взрыв, блядь. И пиздец, вот машина горит, нахуй, одна. И там пару взрывов еще было в поле. Вот. Так что все, я больше нахуй. В Симферополь я больше хуй поеду. Так что вот так вот.
I have to say, I don't think someone's vacation is going to plan. We jump down here and into Crimea, where more fortifications are appearing up ahead of the upcoming tourist season. As spontaneous combustions continue on the peninsula, with the latest being there at Simferopol, as well as in Chongyar, the Russian army is steadily preparing for military actions inside of Crimea itself, digging trench lines and building small fortifications along beaches. Very poorly made trench lines, if I do say so myself. This is in the event of a possible amphibious assault by Ukrainian forces, who maintain no capability for conducting large-scale amphibious operations or sustaining the logistics required for an invasion via an amphibious means. In the light of recent fires, the Russian residents continue to flee the peninsula, creating a huge traffic jam at the already damaged Kerch Bridge. Have a question coming in from Waterbury. Christina says, do you think, Paul, that the Russians will flatten every city in occupied territories as cruelly as Mariupol, Kherson, and Bakhmut and others? How dare they? Yes, if the city has an immense amount of destruction to it, they will attempt to hide whatever they can. Once again, there's two objectives to that. One, to clean up the city, to make it look nice. And the second is to cover up war crimes. And we come down here where the Russians continue to... This is very frustrating. So the horrendous tragedy of this war is it doesn't matter who wins or who loses in some cases. The Russians get what they want. If the Russians win, they will commit genocide and ethnic cleansing against Ukrainians. And they have been. It is a genocide done very poorly, but it is a genocide based off of the Geneva Conventions, the 1949 Geneva Conventions, and the 1993 Rome Statute, which continues to simplify those definitions as well. If the Russians lose, they succeed in killing a large population of people, specifically they're ethnic minorities. The highest conscription numbers in Russia are not in Moscow, nor are they in St. Petersburg. They're in Siberia. They're over on the Mongolian plains. They're over in the Far East. They're in places like Chechnya, in Dagestan. They're in places where there's a large number of ethnic minorities within Russia. See, they're not what you would call a Muscovite. A Muscovite is an individual that is predominantly white, fluently Russian-speaking, predominantly Russian Orthodox, and is from the areas of Moscow or St. Petersburg. These people don't get conscripted. These are people that, under the Soviet Union, had a better lifestyle, usually a better education, a better job, and a better position within the Soviet Party, and therefore better living standards within the city of Moscow itself. And we see where these areas, specifically groups such as the Crimean Tatars, have been subjugated by the Russians, of course, during the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula, but they also then have faced discrimination and they've been suppressed by the Russian government as far as, arresting key figures within the Tatar community. And now this is quite literally the Russians whitewashing Crimea. This is the Russians They have destroyed a part of the historical Crimean Tatar palace. Specifically, they dismantled the golden cabinet of the Karim Jarai Khan. Local reports that the roof, instead of stained windows, the cabinet have now been dismantled. The palace was built during the 16th century and became home to a succession of Crimean Khans. So that's the thing that the Russians are doing right now. We come over here into the Odessa Oblast, where we get a grain corridor update. Quote, over the last 2 days, 7 warships left Ukrainian ports in Odessa through the grain corridor. 182,000 tons of Ukrainian agricultural products are on board, heading to countries of Europe, Africa, and Asia. End quote. And that's coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. You can track these vessels' movements thanks to the United Nations, which maintains the Grain Corridor Initiative, Joint Coordination Center here. So far in total, 14,365,211 tons or metric tons of cargo, agricultural products, have so far been shipped under the Grain Initiative. And we can see that 43% of that being corn, 29% being wheat, 6% being rapeseed, and 6% being sunflower oil, with an additional 15% of all other goods. We can see where the majority of their destinations have been, with large amounts, including 1.9 million tons going to China alone, Spain receiving 2.5, and we can continue to see where other countries are receiving a lot of this grain as well. And you can track each individual ship, what its commodity is, and everything else under here as well as where it's at in the process. Come over here far out into the Black Sea, into the tiny islands that everyone here would know as Snake Island. You can see the destruction of Snake Islands now, as some of Google Maps images have been updating from time to time. We can see destruction of the island itself as a result of the fierce bombardments and the war, what it has taken, the toll it has taken here on the islands, including the destruction of the temple itself. Well, journalists were allowed to visit the infamous Snake Islands, and we can see here where this is the Russian Mi-8. If you remember from when we showed drone footage, an Mi-8 was hit with a missile from a Bayraktar and was subsequently destroyed while offloading troops. We can see that here. It is still sitting there. As well as a multitude of other equipment left to rust on the island after repeated airstrikes made it untenable for the Russians to continue using it as a listening post. And the thing is that this has a very storied history. The island, the Snake Island itself. So this entire sector right here is the land of Achilles. So Achilles, if you have ever heard of the Iliad, which chronicles Achilles as well as a number of other figures in Greek mythology and Greek history during the Trojan Wars, Achilles fought in the Trojan Wars and was killed. This is he was killed after he took an arrow to the back of his leg. Hence, your Achilles heel, or your Achilles tendon, is what that's called, which made him unable to move and therefore fight, and he was therefore killed. The fun fact is that this island is the island of Achilles. Specifically, in ancient Greek mythology, this is where Achilles' body was brought to after he was killed in the Trojan Wars, and he was brought here, and this is his last resting place, where a temple was actually created here on the island of Snake Island. So this is the land of Achilles. This is the kingdom of Achilles. that is the history regarding Snake Island. But that is everything inside the country of Ukraine itself. But that doesn't mean it's the last thing to deal with Ukraine or the ongoing war or any of that. And then there's plenty of other news as we move internationally. We go abroad here, starting off with Moldova. Moldova is something that's been relatively quiet for a little bit now, but we do have this translated. We did end up getting something very interesting coming from Moldova today, and that is that Moldova is no longer going to be dependent on Russian gas anymore. Moldova has ceased to be dependent on Russian gas, according to the Minister of Infrastructure and Regional Development, Andrei Spinu, and we got his announcement from his official Telegram channel. It says, "Dear citizens, for the first time since the history of our country, the right bank will not consume gas delivered by Gazprom. Since last year, we have promised to make reserves and find alternatives to stop being dependent on a single source. I managed to do this. For the month of December, SA Ergocom, according to the CSE decision, will sell 100 million meters cubed of gas to Moldova Gas at an average price of $1,108.61 USD. We do get this from, once again, his official Telegram channel where this announcement came out. Moldova also stated that they were suspending 6 additional Russian language TV channels because they threatened state security, according to the Ministry of Justice. Coming up here from Belarus, here in Minsk, Putin ended up visiting Minsk for the first time in 4 years. Shoigu, Lavrov, and Putin all arrived in Minsk today. The Putin flew with 3 identical planes to avoid being targeted, as well as escorted by fighter aircraft, which caused a series of air raid alarms across Ukraine. We can see here from Anton Zherashenko. As we continue here, it is rumored that the visit was planned to convince Lukashenko to join into the war against Ukraine. Considering the recent updates from the Ukrainian intelligence, an invasion could happen as early as January. Shoigu is seen arriving and looking a little beat up by life.
Игорь.
And here's a bit of irony from Lukashenko, too.
Ну, вы знаете, мы вдвоем соагрессоры, самые вредные, токсичные люди на этой планете. У нас только один спор, кто больше. Владимир Владимирович говорит, что я. Я уже начинаю думать, что он, приняли решение, что вместе одинаково. Вот и все. Минуту, вы знаете.
And there we go. You know, the two of us are co-aggressors, the most harmful and toxic people on this planet. Coming straight from the horse's mouth. And so, we have a couple questions regarding this. Will Belarus kneel down and follow Putin's desires, or will they say no to his demands? And it's very resistant. The fact of the matter is that Lukashenko is obviously a dictator, but his regime has been slowly but surely kind of crumbling to an extent, which is why there's been a push, especially over the last year. Not only has the war in Ukraine pushed this, but this is something. So Belarus and Russia are actually still in a union. For them, the Soviet Union never really collapsed. They're two countries. They share actually a parliament, and the whole point of Belarus and Russia is they have an agreement that at some point they will merge back into one country once again. Lukashenko's regime in Belarus has been crumbling for some time, and we see mass protests and all sorts of stuff against his regime. And one woman, in fact, during the Beijing Olympics, right before the beginning of the war, protested Lukashenko and was swiftly hurried away from the scene, and to the point that everyone feared for her life. And that happened, I mean, just right before this war happened at the Beijing Olympics. So, but entering the war, first of all, the Belarusian military is not exactly superb. Even in Russian standards, it is not considered to be effective. And we've seen what the Russian standards are, so bear that in mind. However, they would add additional manpower to the Russian military. The issue is that the war wouldn't be popular for Lukashenko, and his very light grip on power right now, no matter how much he's suppressing right now, there's already people that are fighting against his regime. There is a Belarusian foreign legion within Ukraine, and Belarusians have no interest in fighting there. The indicators that they have right now is massive amounts of troop movements and stuff to the border, okay, but also a lot of equipment being shipped back and forth between Russia and Belarus. Nothing uncommon. We've seen that. And deployment of anti-air systems along the border with Ukraine. Also, not the craziest thing. They're not going to be able to do a whole lot by themselves, especially considering most of Ukraine's air force is kind of focused on supporting ground efforts in the Far East. So, yes and no. He's definitely resisting, because if there's one thing that people care more about killing the enemy, it's about keeping their power. And by entering the war, Lukashenko at this point has resisted, because he has deduced that if he enters the war and assists Russia directly by entering the war himself, it will be likely that he will actually end up losing his regime and will be overthrown in a very unpopular war. We come over here into Moscow. Of course, we get plenty of humor from the Russian state media, and pretty much everything right now is state-run media. It's controlled by the state or is state-affiliated, as all independent media was either banned or run from the country at the beginning of the war. And here's something for you. Patriot missile systems are even worse than the S-300, at least according to our Russian state TV.
Сейчас вот идет разговор о патриотах, которые, значит, будут туда предоставлены. Но на самом деле очень нестрашная вещь. Эта вещь, так сказать, она даже хуже нашего С-300. Я уж не говорю про С-400 там и прочее. Сейчас вот...
Yes, because the HIMARS were just so bad too. We continue here. Gherkin's at it again. He's back to fear-mongering on his channel, warns of a possible strikes in Moscow during New Year's holidays. Quote, when Putin was strolling around on Kerch Bridge and all air defense systems were focused on keeping him safe, they attacked our airfields. I wouldn't expect anything less these holidays.
Скромнее. Ну, скажем так, я не исключаю возможности.
We're going to bring it to the actual website here.
Скромнее. Ну, скажем так, я не исключаю возможности или на Новый год, или еще в какой-то день удара врага, или по Москве, или по какому-то другому пункту. Они же будут ориентироваться в том числе на наши системы ПВО, на наши возможности. Я не знаю сейчас, как прикрыта Москва, но что-нибудь они, конечно, Новый год обязательно выкинут. Не знаю, против Москвы или нет, но что-нибудь выкинут 100%. Как мы помним, они поздравили Владимира Владимировича.
А мы это предупреждали, помните?
Да.
Мы предугадали.
А толку-то, что мы...
So he just goes on. He's just fear-mongering, essentially, is what that boils down to. He also said something about the first thing true about this. He says, if Russia loses this war, I will go to the Hague with a life sentence, and then I will be brought back to Kyiv, and I will be hung until I am dead. And that was about the only true thing he said thus far this entire war. We also got to pump those numbers up, apparently. New ads ended up hitting state channels today in Russia, promoting signing a contract with the military. Who would have thunk it? This ad follows an old man who can no longer afford groceries who decides to sell his favorite car. After he struggles to sell it for a while, he gets a lowball offer by a scumbag character. But don't worry, his grandson will tell him off and save his grandfather by donating himself to the great cause by joining the Russian military.
Дед, я сфоткал. Что делать? Выставляй на продажу. Хорошо. Дед, ты что тут стоишь? По ней никто не звонил? Завтра в обед придут. Ну ладно.
Дед, долго еще? Мне вообще-то ехать надо.
Да, конечно, извините.
Значит, сразу говорю, 30-ку больше не дам.
Как 30? В объявлении же 60 было.
Дед, ты свою машину видел?
30. Ну мы же договаривались.
Это корыто старше меня.
30 не могу. Мне 60. Очень надо.
Либо 30, либо ничего. Даю минуту подумать.
Ладно, делать нечего. Дед!
Саша?
Не надо нашу ласточку продавать. А вас я более не смею задерживать. Вы, конечно, извините за беспокойство, но свой шанс вы уже упустили. Дед, я контракт подписал. Теперь уж точно не пропадем.
And just remember, if he gets killed, he gets a new car. So he doesn't need the old one. And statistically speaking, that's probably going to happen. Just letting you know. More equipment is headed to the front lines as we take a look here. More Russian equipment, especially additional artillery systems, such as the BM-21 ground system, meaning hail in Russian, was actually sent, as well as logistical vehicles. They continue to clog Russian railways. Russian forces heavily utilize railway traffic in order to move large amounts of troops and equipment. So this is coming here in Russia. And you can see here, that is the BM-21 grad system. You can see the rockets there on the back. You can also see anti-tank guns here. Logistical vehicles, obviously. Fuel vehicles. Many of these retrofitted. These originally came out of stockpiles that they had, that they've had to go through and retrofit and fix up these vehicles so that way they still operate. Over here in the Irkutsk Oblast of Russia, there's a large gas plant explosion, a massive gas plant, one of the largest in Russia, ended up exploding, starting a fire which ended up burning over a 1,000 square meter area. It's unknown what the cause is or if any of these or of any casualties. Would appear that it is not wanting to load. So I apologize for that.
Замок взорвался нахуй, перед баллоном перевернулся, блядь, с волной. Здесь завод взорвался нахуй. Здесь завод нахуй. Там пиздец хуярит. Завод взорвался. Я у меня двери вылетели, ёбаный рот. Двери? Вон все нахуй.
I don't think that's what you would consider to be having a good day at work. Something I almost missed over here because it looked like it was in Ukraine, but it's not. It's coming out of Belgorod. There was an explosion in Belgorod as well. Explosions took the city, and it's unclear if this is a Ukrainian strike, partisan activity, or an accident. But large explosions occurred at a local warehouse. Military personnel were present at the scene, suggesting the warehouse may contain military equipment and supplies. Belgorod remains a vital logistical hub for Russian forces, and we also had a quote coming out today that we're not quite sure what we can attribute to, but it would be in line with what else Ukraine has done, especially considering Belgorod's location. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine conduct military operations on the territory of the country aggressor, Russia. The targets of the Ukrainian army are the objects of the Russian troops used to attack Ukraine, according from Vadim Skitsabitsky, a representative of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine.
Я тебе сейчас видео отправлю. Это 4-й корпус, нахуй. А я находился вот в этом, нахуй, рядом, который. Въебало хорошо на... Я тебе сейчас...
Once again, you can see military personnel there. We continue on, continuing our march to the Far East, where this is... So it really doesn't matter what side of the war that you're on, because this sucks. So it's a very gut-wrenching video, but it's very important. This is a grieving mother that's told that her son has been killed in the country of Ukraine. This is a Russian mother. She's then given a Medal of Bravery in a plastic bag with the words, "Congratulations," and then followed by, "Can you sign this so we can confirm the receipt of the death certificate?"
И мне просьба, можно вашу подпись, чтобы вы получили орден? У меня ручка есть. И здесь извещение, но это такая формальность, а о смерти вашего...
That is the reality for every single casualty that Russia is taking in Ukraine. And you don't have to look at numbers posted by official figures to know that it's staggering. Now, we don't ever report on military casualties. There's a reason for that. Military casualties, we're never going to truly know what the reality of those numbers are going to be for a very long time, years probably. But we do know, based off of the footage that we've seen, the number of casualties we've seen from both sides, that it is a staggering loss, especially for the Russians. The amount of casualties taken. Every single tank that blows up is 3 casualties. Every single BMP, every single tank, every single BTR, every single BMD is at least 3 casualties in amongst the crew. Not including infantry, not including artillery personnel, not including the Air Force. None of that. Just the vehicles. Just the armored vehicles. It is insane to think about the loss of life, especially on the Russians. We've taken significantly more casualties throughout the duration of this war. And the war of attrition is only going to get worse the less and less experienced the troops are that are being put into action. So that is the reality. It doesn't matter what side of the war you're on. You have to remember, as much as we like to talk about it, and as much as we like to, cheer on, the casualty count going higher and higher for, because it means that Ukraine is winning, as they attrit the Russians to the point that they can't fight a war anymore. The reality is that there are people that are dying. That is what is happening in this war. There are people that are dying horrific deaths, and are just there. It's a waste of life and every bit of human potential. It's an absolute waste. It is nothing more. War is nothing more than an absolute waste of life and potential. And it's happening on an abysmal industrial scale. Over here in Magadan Oblast, here in the very far east, another Russian Mi-8 helicopter has crashed. This time, however, the crew was managed to escape relatively unharmed. You can see what the remnants of that Mi-8 here. Looks like the majority of the fuselage burned up upon impact. Jumping over here into the rest of Europe, we jump over to Berlin, where a cylindrical aquarium ended up exploding. The world's largest freestanding cylindrical aquarium exploded shortly before 6 a.m. on December the 16th, spilling 1 million liters of water and debris onto the major roadway in the middle of Meat district. The aquarium, situated inside a hotel and used to contain 1,500 exotic fish of 40 different species. 2 people were injured by splinters of glass. 350 hotel guests were evacuated due to concerns regarding structural damage. The mayor of Berlin reported that none of the 1,500 fish, unfortunately, could not be saved. The incident is speculated to be an accident that occurred amid frozen temperatures at negative 10 degrees Celsius. So that is a before and after photo of that aquarium. In the United Kingdom, Ukrainian troops continue to train. The Ukrainian military recruits are receiving NATO-style training from a coalition of instructors inside of the United Kingdom. In total, 10,000 Ukrainian troops are expected to be to undergo the UK's training program, which cuts down instruction to military necessities for survival and combat effectiveness. These troops will be equipped and then returned to Ukraine to join the fight on the front lines. We're getting this from the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom's official Twitter. Apparently, these troops are in the northern part of the United Kingdom, receiving wintertime training. As we continue southward, we come over here into Georgia, where here in Batumi, Georgia, a fire ended up breaking out at a residential building. Fire broke out at a residential complex Vox in Batumi. The fire broke out on the top floor of the building where the restaurant is located. The restaurant was closed at the time of the fire, presumably undergoing renovations. There was no one inside the restaurant at the time. Everyone else who lived in the building was quickly evacuated. And as we continue on southward here, we jump over here to Damascus, Syria, where Israel conducted multiple airstrikes in Damascus. Al Arabiya reports the attack came after an Iranian cargo plane landed in Damascus airport. Syrian news agency SANA alleged that 2 military personnel were injured and damage was caused in an Israeli attack at Damascus airport on Monday night. The IDF has refused comments on any operation that may or may not be occurring on foreign soil. Let me see some of the results here. So that is the situation there in Damascus. We come up here into northern Iraq, where the Islamic State militants ended up killing federal police. An armored personnel carrier and a Hummer of the federal police were blown up by 2 explosive devices of Islamic State militants in the Riyadh district in the Kirkuk governorate, as a result of which at least 8 people were killed and injured. Islamic State fighters released a statement with more details regarding the attack. According to the text, the attack took place between the villages of Safra and Tarfavi. In addition to triggering an explosive device, terrorists opened fire from various weapons. The militants estimated the result of their attack at 10 killed. Is that the only Islamic State attack over here? We come over here to Abu Bali here, which is in the Diyala governorate. Local sources reported an attack by Islamic State militants on the militia of the Shiite village of Abu Bali in the Al-Khalis district of the Diyala governorate. According to official government sources, the total number of victims was 14 people, 8 dead and 7 injured. According to eyewitnesses, first the terrorists blew up explosive devices and then opened machine gun fire on those who arrived at the scene. Let me see here. And some of what's happening there in the Diyala government. In Tehran, or around Tehran, the physician treating injured protesters was killed. 36-year-old physician, Ada Rostami, was killed after treating protesters in Ekbatan and other western neighborhoods of Tehran. Dr. Rostami was last seen alive on December the 12th when she was taking care of several wounded protesters in Ekbatan. She did not return after leaving the protesters' house to get more supplies. The local police told the family that she had a car accident. The family was told to pick up her body at the morgue. It was reported that both of her hands were broken and one eye completely came out. There's another article on this from the Iran Wire. A couple incidents taking place here in Afghanistan. Residents protested against the Taliban. Residents of 8 villages in the vicinity of Saripol protested against the Taliban. Reportedly, the dissatisfaction is connected with the fact that the Taliban ordered them to leave their land within a specific period. Otherwise, the movement will use force. The area of 1.2 thousand hectares where Tajik and Uzbek families live is contested. Meanwhile, a truck ended up catching fire in the Salong tunnel. A truck reportedly exploded on the north side of the tunnel at about 18:30 local time, or 6:30 at night local time, for an unknown reason. The fire lasted about an hour, during which the Taliban blocked traffic through the tunnel. The Taliban have confirmed the death of 31 people thus far. The spokesman, announced by Sharafat Zaman Amarkel, a spokesman for the Taliban Ministry of Health, warning that the number of victims is still growing. 37 people are currently listed as injured. And in the Gulf of Thailand, a Thailand warship ended up capsizing, leaving 31 sailors missing. The Thai Navy says 31 sailors are currently missing after a warship carrying more than 100 crewmen capsized and sank during a storm in the Gulf of Thailand. HTMS Sukhothai sank in the water after water flooded its power controls on Sunday night. On Monday, authorities said that they had rescued 75 sailors, but 31 were still missing in rough seas. Let me see what's left of the ship as it is currently sitting there capsizing. This article was actually submitted by White Raven from our Discord. So thank you very much, White Raven. Jump over here into Africa, where coming out of Somalia, coming over in the Adel area, the United States announced 2 attacks in Somalia. At the request of the federal government of Somalia, the United States Africa Command conducted 2 collective self-defense strikes, one each on December the 14th and 17th of this year, in support of the Somali National Army engagements against Al-Shabaab near Kadel, Somalia. Official report coming from the United States African Command. At the request of the federal government of Somalia in support of the strikes, and on the December 14th strike took place 176 kilometers northeast of Mogadishu in the vicinity of Kadel. The current assessment is 7 Al-Shabaab terrorists were killed. On December 17th, strike took place approximately 220 kilometers northeast of Mogadishu, also in the vicinity of Kadel. The command's initial assessment is 8 Al-Shabaab terrorists were killed. U.S. Africa's initial assessment is that no civilians were injured or killed in either strike. U.S. Africa Command takes a great measure to prevent civilian casualties. Protecting civilians remains a vital part of the command's operations to promote greater security for all Africans. Al-Shabaab is the largest and most deadly al-Qaeda network in the world and has proven both its will and capability to attack Somali, East African, and American civilians. U.S. kinetic actions against Al-Shabaab in Somalia are conducted in support of the federal government of Somalia's ongoing campaign to disrupt terrorist operations in their country. Somalia remains key to the stability and security of all of East Africa. U.S. Africa Command's forces will continue training, advising, and equipping partner forces to give them the tools that they need to defeat Al-Shabaab. U.S. Africa Command will continue to assess the results of the operations and will provide additional information as appropriate. Specific details about the units involved and assets used will not be released in order to ensure operations security. Once again, the official statement coming from U.S. Africa Command. And according to the Morocco summit earlier this year, the fight against fundamental extremist terrorism in the world, especially that of the Islamic State, is actually the forefront of that battlefield, has shifted from the Middle East and is now in Africa, where a number of different extremist organizations and terrorist groups operate within the country and continue to expand their power as this region has received a significantly less focus over the years. Coming out of Nigeria, specifically coming out of Kaduna, Nigeria, 30 civilians were killed by unknown militants. 30 civilians may have been killed or have been killed in a militant attack on the Kaduna state. The attack took place in the village of Malagum and Sukong in the Kura County. According to eyewitnesses, dozens of armed men opened fire on the inhabitants of the settlements. Some of the victims were burned by the attackers. No one has yet taken responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, to the southwest, Nigerian forces rescued 7 Chinese civilians. Chinese citizens. Nigerian Air Force Special Forces rescued 7 Chinese citizens abducted by militants during the raid on Kafin Dakar in the Kaduna province. They were captured in June while working at a mine in Shiroro, Niger State. And in Algeria, Algerian forces ended up eliminating 2 separate militants. The Algerian Armed Forces announced the elimination of 2 militants and the detention of 2 more. The counterterrorism operation took place in the district of Il Ghazam in the province of Tamanrasset. Security forces ambushed terrorists near an Algerian-Niger border. Moreover, the militants found an impressive arsenal for 4 people. 4 cars, 3 machine guns, a 12.7 millimeter caliber, so Dishka, RPK 7 Kalashnikov or AK style rifles, RPG 7 SVD, and communications equipment. Part of this was destroyed in a fire that arose during the clash. It is not known which group the militants currently belong to. And that allows us to talk about some of the more uplifting things of the night. So we always try to end the night on a good, more or less uplifting or interesting note, considering all of the kind of depressing stuff we have to talk about in the news every day. We want to, kind of end on something, a little bit nicer. And so we actually go up here, and this is coming out of Antalya, Turkey, where a rare 2-headed turtle was found. Currently, it was found here in Antalya and is currently under the protection in a vet clinic. Coming from Memo Middle East Monitor. Once again, there it is. It is a rare 2-headed turtle. Isn't it just adorable? Coming over here and into North America, we jump down here into Athens, Georgia, where we see scientists ended up developing a method to allow trees to flower in mere months. Normal breeding experiments can take years to come to fruition. When scientists want to improve a variety of vegetable, it can take a year or less to see changes, but breeding improvements into trees can take years, sometimes decades, before changes can really be seen. Using the CRISPR gene editing tool, Shijie Sai of the UGA Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources and Franklin College of Arts and Sciences has developed a method that shortens the time it takes a poplar tree to flower from about 7 to 10 years to just a few months. By reducing this time frame, it can accelerate tree breeding and for improved traits such as cold or drought tolerance. If you want to know more about that, you can check out phys.org, which has an article on this, or the original article coming from the NPH online library.wiley.com. And to finish off our night, we come up here into Montreal, where astronomers find 2 exoplanets may be mostly water. A team led by University of Montreal astronomers found the evidence that 2 exoplanets orbiting a red dwarf star are water worlds, planets where water makes up a large fraction of the volume. These worlds, located in a planetary system 218 light years away, in the constellation Lyra, are unlike any planets found in our solar system. And while water wasn't directly detected on these planets, by comparing the sizes and masses of planets to models, they concluded that a significant fraction of their volume, up to half of it, should be made of materials that are lighter than rock but heavier than hydrogen or helium. So in comparison to Earth, they're expecting Kepler 138d to mostly be made up of metals and rocks at the core, or closer to the core, while high pressure water and water vapor make up the vast majority of the surface. And if you'd like to know more about that, phys.org also, once again, has a wonderful article on that. That's going to be able to explain that much better than myself. But I hope that kind of wraps you guys up. That does wrap up our night here at the New News. And there's been a ton of different stuff obviously happening over the last 48 hours. A lot of big topics, a lot of developments in the war in Ukraine, of course. That bloody section of Donetsk still really just turned into a horrendous meat grinder at this point. And obviously the situation isn't looking so fair for Russia. But there's a ton of different stuff happening throughout the world. I hope that in the midst of that you, your family, and your friends are remaining safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Please be sure, if you are able to, please check out the video description below. And the whole point of this channel is not only to inform you, but to also give you a chance and let us help us be the news that gives back, to help some of the people affected by these very same situations. Be sure to check out the video description below and check out all of the wonderful organizations listed down there, not just the ones for Ukraine, but for elsewhere throughout the world, including Ethiopia, Somalia, most of Africa, parts of the United States and South America, as well as places in Southeast Asia. And give as much support as you can to those organizations. 80% or more of the donations they do receive go directly to their programs, which means they go directly to helping people instead of paying for salaries and administration's costs. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. And one of the biggest things you can do is help us support the channel. The more people that come here and the more people that are here, the more of an impact that this channel and this community can and will have on the world at large, and a bigger impact we'll be able to make in bringing a little bit of light back into the dark times a lot of people are facing. So give us that like and subscribe. Share this amongst your friends and community. You can always follow us on our Discord. You can jump on there, enjoy the awesome community there. You've already seen some stuff posted by them, or also on our social media. But the more people that see this, the better the better things that can happen with it. So thank you very much for the support you've already given us. I hope to see you guys again on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, for another 48 hours of news and review. And with that, everybody, once again, I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your night. My name is Paul from the New News, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бочок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double and shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляє до волновах, і чудно кличить, ідіть
нахуй!